Yeah, we're live. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain there. He's not a wizard. He's not a real wizard. How's everybody doing? We are live. It's 8:34. I'm a little bit late tonight. Had a bunch of stuff that I had to get done, including, as you saw, hopefully all you guys have now taken a look at the video that I posted today. That is the big comparison, the big shootout that I promised between the 5.3 liter, the aluminum L33 that I have run endlessly, but not into the ground. It seems to like keep working. It seems to be very, very happy. Probably because it was blessed with ring gap from above. The 6 liter, not so much, not so much blessed. When I took that one apart, you saw in some of the photos, for the guys that watched the video, you saw in some of the photos that and I only showed 2 of them. There were more than that. A couple of the cylinders on the 6 liter were definitely rusty. Almost all of the oil rings, the oil control rings, were seized. So they were just locked in one place. They just get a bunch of deposits on them and they just get gummed up, and then it hardens and then they just stick like that. So the ring is no longer rotating, which the rings rotate while the motor's going. And so the oil control rings don't do a good job if they're like that. So all you got to do is you can either take them out, you can put oil in there, you can put WD-40, you can put brake clean or whatever, and you can like free them up and get them spinning and get them working. A lot of times I'll on the ones for the big bang motors, what I've done is take them out, and then you got to get all the stuff off of them. You can soak them in gas, you can beat on them while they can hit them and stuff. You can clean them out with a pick and stuff. And then you got to clean out the rails too, because the rails get buildup on them and it stops the thing from wanting to move. It basically just kind of gets everything bigger, and it doesn't want to work in the size of the groove for all of that, because you've added a bunch of material there. So you got to get that stuff off, clean it off, put it back in, and it all seems to free up fairly well. A couple of the rings on the 6 liter, the regular top and bottom rings, a couple of those were not moving it either. Now, they weren't pinched or anything. There's nothing wrong with the pistons. It's just that they had a bunch of stuff in them. And so we freed those up and they would work. And then the same thing, and this is pretty typical of the things that I get from the wrecking yard. If we take them apart, like we're putting ring gap in them, which is fairly common. You know, if I'm going to tell you to do it, you should do it. Although I have run several with no ring gap, or where I have not checked them, like this L33. We ran a bunch of boost on it, but it turned out it had ring gap anyway. So the gods were smiling on me. But the other thing that happens is, because these things have run for so long and they get buildup on them, that the piston and the pin and the rod will only move they only have now the amount of movement that is required for them to run. Like, they don't rock back and forth all the way. There's no free movement there. And I don't know what it affects. It certainly makes me feel better when I do this, but we clean all that stuff and free it up and put WD-40 and, like I said, brake cleaner, oil, and everything. Whenever I put these motors together, I always oil the pins and the small end of the rod and the pistons and all that stuff. So, but we do that, and then you can usually work them free and get them, free range of motion basically. And we did that to all of them too. And then after cutting the stock rings and putting them back in, we did ring gap on it, and then head studs and gaskets, and I even did on the 6 liter and I didn't mention this in the video in this last one, but we did the razor blade rebuild on the 317 heads, just scratch them basically with both the deck surface on the head and on the block. We just cleaned them off with a razor blade basically, so they're machined. And then I also took all the valves out, particularly the exhaust valves. The intake valves were pretty clean. The exhaust valves were pitted pretty bad, which is typical of a high mileage thing. And so we just took them. I take them over to the wire wheel, clean all of the valves, intakes and exhaust, because they get a lot of buildup back behind them. And we clean all that up. And then on the exhaust valves, we didn't do this on the intakes because they looked good enough for what we were doing. On the exhaust valves, though, we put the lapping compound on them and use the drill, and you just put pressure on it and move it back and forth. And so we basically just kind of, we didn't do a valve job on them. We just lapped them in better than they were, from where the way that they were running before. And then we put new springs on it and new seals and stuff. We put the BTR springs on it. So shout out to the BTR guys. And we put the bigger springs on it. We put the 625 lift BTR springs on it. And the reason that we did that, those are good springs. We sell them at richardholdnerperformance.com. But we were going to run different cams on the 6-liter. We did. We ran the Trailblazer SS or the Truck Plus cam with the Trailblazer SS. We did an intake swap too, and we ran the low buck truck camshaft. That's what we did for this last video where we ran the things NA and ran them under boost. So because we were running bigger cams, we just put the bigger springs in it. We ran both cams with it. It worked equally fine. And then we ended up running the 5.3, also the L33 with the stock 799 heads. It also had the a BTR spring upgrade on it. And we ran it with the low buck truck cams that we sell at the store. And those work really good. Worked good for boost and stuff. And the cool thing was that we could compare them. Now, the interesting thing is we didn't run these. Certainly, we have run the 5.3 in stock configuration, but we didn't get to run the 6-liter because we had an oiling problem with the 6-liter. I'll probably do a video on this and talk. In fact, I'll be asking you guys what you guys think, what happened here. But when we did this, no, I lost my train of thought. On the 6-liter, after we did the cylinder heads, we did the guides, we did all that stuff. We ran it with the low buck truck camshaft. And what we wanted to do was run them both with the same camshafts and the same intake manifolds, which we had those configurations both on the 5.3 and on the 6-liter. And then we wanted to run them with the same turbo also. Because what I wanted to show really, and maybe this could have been done on a live feed or whatever, but what I wanted to show was a 6-liter definitely makes more low speed power. So like if you look, and I know where I was going with this, but if you look at the comparison between an L33, which is the kind of high output version of a 5.3 liter, if you look at that, it's rated at 310 horsepower. If you look at the power ratings of an LQ4, it's rated between 300 and 330 horsepower, depending on what year it is. The early ones had iron heads, the later ones had the aluminum 317s, and then as we get past a certain year, they changed to a camshaft. In fact, they put a better camshaft in it, or a bigger camshaft, I would say, than the L33 has. The L33 had more compression, it had 9.9 to 1 versus 9.4 to 1. You know, it had a dish piston and the 317 head, whereas the L33, even though it was smaller, had a flat top piston and the 799 head. So, and I would argue that not only is the compression better on the 799 head, the chamber is better too. The chamber itself is better. So both those motors came with early truck manifolds, but we put the Trailblazer SSs, which we know is, 10, 12, 15 horsepower, depending on what kind of camshaft you're testing it on. And they both worked very well. No matter how we tested it, whether we tested with the truck manifolds, which we ran them with Trailblazer SS intake manifolds, with the different camshafts and stuff, the 6-liter always did the same thing. Even if these would have made let's say exactly the same peak power, they didn't. The 6-liter actually made a little bit more, but they were within 10 horsepower, 12 horsepower, whatever at the top, which is kind of what we expected given the factory power ratings. Now we ran them with the bigger camshafts because we would put the low buck truck camshafts in them, but they both had the same cam and they both had the same intake manifold. So the only difference was displacement and compression, cylinder head, that kind of stuff. So when we ran them like that, the LQ4 made a little bit more power, but it made a lot more torque. And even it made like 25 foot-pounds more or something peak to peak, but it made as much as 45 or 50, down in the lower RPM range, which is where truck guys want this. And that's one of the benefits of getting a 6-liter over a 5.3 is not the peak power thing, because you're not going to get it on, especially on an LQ4 compared to this one. Now an LQ4 compared to a LM7, that would be a different thing, smaller cam and stuff, not as much compression, all of that. Or an LQ9 that has higher compression and the better camshaft. That would be another test that you could do to see the differences. But regardless of what happens with that, down low, the 6-liter is definitely going to make more torque. And so when we introduce the turbo into this situation, what happens is we get a lot better response rate. Now, when we're running I showed a video where we ran that GTX 3584. We don't need more response rate. we have all the response rate we need, even on a 5.3. I will run that because guys have asked. We will run that on a 6-liter, and I do recommend that turbo for a 6-liter. Like if you want immediate boost response, like you want positive displacement kind of boost response, that turbo will definitely work. It's just not going to be what I recommend for a guy. Like if a guy wants 600 at the tire or whatever, yeah, it will definitely do that. But if you're wanting 700, then I would put the bigger turbo on. Like the G42 turbo is going to be fantastic in a 6-liter. And it's going to be fantastic in a 6-liter that's better than this one, like something that has more compression. Like if you were to take the 317 heads off and put 799 heads on, or 706 heads, 706 heads might be a little much in terms of compression, because it's not really necessary when you have the turbo. But if you put 799 heads on it, it would be it would be a great combination, especially with that low buck truck camshaft. You got the Trailblazer SS or the truck manifold. Quite honestly, if I was putting a turbo on it, I wouldn't bother buying the Trailblazer SS intake manifold. If you had to buy it, if you have one, somebody gave you one, or you found one at a wrecking yard cheap or whatever, that's fantastic. It is better. But if I was putting boost to it, I wouldn't bother with it, because the turbo is going to decide how much power you make. Those other things are just going to help you decide, like, okay, what boost level am I going to make that at? I mean, there might be a little bit more at the peak or whatever, but if you're trying to get 1,200 horsepower from a 1,200 horsepower turbo, you need a 1,500 horsepower turbo, and now life will be much, much better for you. Every time we try to max out, whether it's that M90 supercharger or any kind of turbo, or anytime we try to max that out, what you should be thinking is, you shouldn't be thinking, hey, I got this much out of it. You should be thinking, I need a bigger one of these. Instead of an M90, I need a 112 or a 122 or a Kenny Bell or a Whipple or something, a 2650. And the same thing with the turbo. Oh, hey, I'm going to try to get 800 out of a GTX 3584 with my 6-liter. No, you shouldn't be trying to do that. I mean, I'm not saying you can't. And if you went all in, you probably could. But you should pick a better turbo, better for that application. It would work much better. But what I suspect is that G42 turbo is going to be really popular with 6-liter guys. Guys are going to be making, and also it's very responsive. Everybody wants to see the comparison between that G42 and other big name turbos. I'm not here to like make other people mad or whatever. I like the G42 better. I've tested it against the Virens turbo. I have one of his 7875 Gen 2s. I've used it, or Gen 2.5. I've used it a lot. It works great. I got nothing but good things to say about him. I like the G42 better. We will also run a test. I haven't done it yet because we just didn't have time when we were doing all this. One of the other ones that I want to compare it to is my old standby that I recommend, is an S475. I want to compare it to a T6 S475, and what is going to happen, and this should be of no surprise to anybody, is a G42 is going to be better on both ends of that turbo than an S475. It's going to be more responsive than an S475, and it's going to be able to make more power than an S475. So a T6 S475 is not going to be as responsive, especially as this V-band G42. So the G42 compared to an S475 is going to be like what we did with the GTX 3584 compared to the GT45. It's just better on both ends, and this one is better on both ends than the S475. And we went looking for that, and we had to look at a lot of different things before we found that. But I want to test that and verify that and have actual data so that we can talk about that. I will not stop telling people go buy stuff from Viren. I will not tell people don't buy an S475. I'm just going to be able to give them data now on what happens. Hey, do you want more response or whatever? Here we have that for you. we have what you need, and we have the billet boost blocks. That's that, because it has alliteration, and I'm a fan of alliteration. Billet boost blocks are the thing that we talked about earlier today or yesterday. It all runs into each other, but it's the vacuum tree basically that you can hook all of your reference lines to. Billet boost block, those are available now also. Untrue, Nathan, what's going on? 6-liter for the win. You like that one? Jordan, Mingo. 5.3 versus 6.0. How much do you have in your wallet to start with? Well, from the wrecking yard, if you can find both of those, they're the same price. So those are good starting points. And there's no bad choice there, in my opinion. An aluminum 5.3 or even an iron 5.3 is a really good starting point. I mean, anything that you could add a cam and springs and injectors, whatever, and put a turbo on it and make 1,000 horsepower, that's just nothing but a win there. If you can do it with a 6-liter, again, more response rate, all of that. But like a guy that has a turbo 5.3 is, and that G42 is just like a converter away from it being a 6-liter. I think I'm going to sell lots of converters for the converter guys. Which of your turbos you recommend for a 5-liter similar to the one you have tested? Is the faster spool significant on the smaller one? Yes, a GTX 3584 will be much more responsive than anything that you put on there, except an even smaller version of that. It doesn't come down to that. The first question is, how much power do you want to make? If you want to make more than 800, or even if you wanted to make 800, I would pick the 42. If you're the GTX turbo is really going to be for a guy that wants immediate boost and is not trying to make like 4-digit power level stuff. That's going to be that guy. I watch your videos trying to figure out which cam I want for my 6-liter. I think I'm sticking with a sloppy stage 2. Okay, you can. What else are you doing with your 6-liter? That's more a 5.3 versus a 469. In fact, I was talking to Amos, 8.1 guy, the guy that supplied the 8.1 for the testing that I'm doing, and he is doing turbo manifolds for the 8.1. And so we were talking about the different turbos, and he's been doing or looking down the road to do T6 stuff. And I said, well, if the S475 T6 is the thing that you're thinking of putting on there, you should do a T4, and you should put this G42 on there, because that's going to work great on that motor. Because the guys with 8.1s are not going to be revving the motor very high. In fact, I mean, not all of them. Most of them will not be. And that's the thing with if you're concerned at all about back pressure, the more RPM you run, the higher the back pressure is going to be. Not only the higher the boost, but the higher the RPM. Really need your input. Have you ever messed with an LZ1 engine out of a hybrid? Gonna build one for the Silverado? I'm not familiar with that. What is it? LZ1 engine specs. It's a 6-liter, 2008 to 9. I mean, it's the same as all the others. It responds exactly the same, because it's just a 6-liter. It's a hybrid Vortec. Use GM hybrid trucks. It has AFM and VVT, so you have to get rid of both of those. 10.7, 330 horsepower, 367 foot-pounds, 10 to 13s. It's an aluminum 6-liter? Wow. Okay, so I see it's a 799 243 cathedral-headed deal. Okay, so it's like a truck version of LS2, 200, 208. Okay. Okay, so what's your question about that? Yeah, Anthony, you can ask whatever you want about that. I just wondered if when you said hybrid, I thought it was attached to something weird. 5.3 for the money. What's going on, Trey? I have 5 5.3s, 1 4.8, and 2 6.0s. Buy what's convenient and affordable. It sounds to me like you have a problem. You have a hoarding problem, which is a good one to have. Give you an old school 400 to help with. Okay. Got the BSA running and driving today. Almost no brakes. Uh-oh. Boss, wondering about the flange on the G42. Not much information on it. Looking to swap from a 7875 that has an S400 flange. Is a direct swap. I need to check with Jimmy. The ones that we ran were V-band, were 3-inch V-band flanges on the hot side. So I'll ask him if I will have to ask him if they're T4 stuff. Do you deck blocks with a sanding block and not advocate it? I have done that before, but that's not what I normally do. What we've done on the razor blade rebuild is I just scrape off all the gas material and clean it up. I don't necessarily deck it. Have you ever gooned to a 6-liter? I don't know what that is. 1930s BSA, that's very cool. G42 has a small turbo for a 5.3 built like yours. How much slower is a spool on the big turbo versus a small one? You're asking the wrong question. How much power do you want to make? You got to tell me how much power you want to make. That's the first question. Everything else being the same, is there a significant difference between a 6.0 and a 6.2? 6.2 costs more, but available all aluminum, weighs 100 pounds less. Yes, you can also get aluminum 6 liters though, if you wanted to do that. But, and somebody brought this up in this comparison between the iron LQ4 and the aluminum 5.3, is that, yeah, it's 100 pounds and 100 pounds versus 500 is a pretty big change, but 100 pounds change in 5,000 pounds is not even going to be noticeable. The intake just changes how the engine is to drive once you have turbos. I don't know what you mean by that. Would you recommend changing the throttle body on a supercharged L99 or keep the stock throttle body? It depends what kind of supercharger it is. Is it a positive displacement blower where it's drawing through the supercharger, or it's drawing through the throttle body? Or are you blowing through the throttle body like with a Torque Storm or Vortex supercharger or a Pro Charger? If you're blowing through it, I don't worry about the throttle body. If you're drawing through it, put as big a throttle body on as you can. What's a good choppy cam for an NA? Well, what are you doing with it other than wanting chop? So let's talk about that. Are you trying to do it with a stock converter? Is it a manual trans? Is it automatic? Is it a daily driver? What else are you trying to do? Scrolling. Looking at the G42 and it's looking very tempting. I'm looking to forward this for 75. Yeah, I'll do that, Amos, and I'll let you know. See, there's Amos. You guys can ask him questions. So glad to catch it live. Grease spots in the house. What would you recommend for a person that did not want to break open their engine, just do a small boost application? Would you recommend a turbo or a supercharger? Either one of those will work. You just have to be spot on your tune and not try to go crazy on the boost. I like the G42 Scottish. Can you T51R the 3584? Because you want some kind of noise. I don't know what that is. I know that it's a noisemaker, and I don't want to do that to a turbo if it makes the turbo less effective. What is optimal quench? You have to, there's not that. That's like asking what's the best cam. I surfaced my head 20 and used 27 head gasket, 706 head. Okay. All of that's fine. I would, where is the piston in that? Normally on an LS, the piston can be at TDC or even proud of the deck by 5 or 6 thousandths. If it's 5 or 6 thousandths up and you have a 27 head gasket, I don't think that's a good idea. I'd be more concerned with piston to head clearance. Do we need a boost controller for a street car? Some guys like it so that you can have different boosts and gears and do some fun things with it. But I've run lots of stuff on manual controllers. Truck Norris Cam S366. Stock bottom end, no ring gap, 70-pound injectors, big fuel pump. Guess the power going on the dyno in 3 days. It would depend on how much boost you're going to run. And also, more importantly for this, what fuel you're going to use. Turbo 400 versus 4L80 for a daily. I like the overdrive transmissions because I tend to drive on the freeway a lot. I really like my boosted 12.3 to 1 6-liter. When you mentioned the GTX, what gen are you talking about? There are different generation GTXs. What's better, iron or aluminum 5.3? It depends on what you're trying to do. Are you concerned about weight? Then obviously the aluminum. The LSX 454 with an 88 millimeter turbo, Summit Ghost Cam, Terminator X, debating on which boost controller to use. Okay. I mean, if you're doing a Terminator, the Terminator will control like a 3-port. So I don't know why you just wouldn't do that. Trey, I'm scrolling back to see if you said something about that. I'm just trying to go back here. Trey, I don't 800 to 900 wheel horsepower twin turbo. So what was your question? I scrolled back to see if you had asked a question, but I didn't see it. Thanks on the advice for the 5.3. I went with a GT45 and a 4L80. Okay. I got a 6.2 truck engine with forged internals. I also have an LSA supercharger that has a ported snout, an 850cc injectors. How much horsepower do you think I can get out of it? It depends on what fuel you're using. You get less out of it out of an 850cc injector with E85. And also you're going to get less out of it with a supercharger because it's not going to show on the dyno because some of that is going to be used to drive the blower. Has anyone run a mild motor for many hours on a 2-step? Do we know the best and worst of what an engine on a stutter is? I guess it could be worse than assumed. You mean you want somebody to put it on a 2-step and just walk away from it for hours? That seems like really bad. T6 versus T4 for the street. I would always err for a more responsive turbo. So a T4 would be better. 799 heads work good on a 5.3. Yes, this L33 came factory with 799 heads. You should sell bolt turbo kits for Chevy trucks. Yeah, we probably won't do dedicated turbo kits because I don't want to do different chassis and stuff. Matt, what's going on? Hello, what turbo recommended for twin turbo setups for what power level? Anybody heard of a way to integrate paddle shifters into a truck, such as an NBS, specifically a 4L80? Has anybody done paddle shifters for the 4L80? Will milled and refreshed 706 heads and flat top pistons get me more horsepower in a 5.3? Yes. More than what? Do you see the video Cletus made using moonshine? Did that just happen recently or was it long ago? We ran, I have a video there where we ran, when I was out with BTR, we ran a motor on moonshine. It makes less power. The recent mono header setup, you like that? You like the side piece? Did you feel comfortable running a turbo with a system like the Edelbrock ProFlow 4? The system doesn't allow computer tuning. It's self-tuning, and you can make minor adjustments through the app. I would want to make more than minor adjustments, especially on the timing, and I don't like something being closed loop. Unless you would need to be able to tell it, hey, I want you to run 11.5 or 11.0 or whatever the air fuel is. If it has a commanded air fuel, as long as it does that. Both are great. The 5.3 is more available. Yeah, an aluminum 5.3 not as available as iron stuff. Truly enjoy all the videos, cams, turbos, etc. Thank you. Is the GTX 3584 the same physical size as the GT 3582 for packaging in an engine bay? I think it probably is. I have both of those, and I honestly don't know if different suppliers of that GT 3582, if the different suppliers are different size turbos. Like, I don't know if a max speeding GT 3582 is different than a DNA one or whoever else sells these. So I'm not, maybe those guys make their own housings and stuff. So I don't know if physically there's a difference, but I could compare the ones that I have the next time I go down and see which one of those is, I could measure them. Scrolling. Jags brand LS Gen 4 head studs. Any thoughts for an affordable good stud? Too many other projects to spend $400 on ARPs. I've only ever tried inexpensive ones. One time we got some stuff from one of the guys and we went to torque them and they didn't even torque. They just stretch. And so I'm like, look, I'm just going to use ARP stuff. I'm going to spend more money on it. And that's probably not a good way to be. But when you're trying to put something together on the dyno and that stops you from running that day and being expensive, I don't want that to happen. You typically change the cam bearings, not in any of the LSs that we run. I have an L33 with 220,000 miles on it, getting mixed reviews, wondering what to do for cam bearings. My truck has 350,000 on it, and it still has the original ones. None of the junkyard motors that we run do we do that. If I'm putting together, if I'm completely remachining something, like if we put together, like let's say a 383, I would put new cam bearings in it. Otherwise, we don't normally do that. Chevrolet Performance Engine 4.8 liter LY2, a good purchase. I don't know about that one if you're buying it from Chevrolet. I mean, I don't think anybody knows more about these motors than they do, but I don't know how expensive that is. Would VS Racing 7875 make 1,000 horsepower on a 6 liter? I don't know which generation you're talking about. And I've not tried that. So like I have a Gen 2.5. And I'd like to see, I think it will do 1,000 flywheel on a 6 liter, I would think. What happens when you put a big cam with a stock converter? It's really, really soft down low. Anybody make a kit for a 5.3 into a Crown Vic? I think that'd be pretty specialized. Bad idea to look at the cam bearings. I wonder if the T51R mod would noticeably affect turbo efficiency. 2.5 piping for street car versus 3-inch. I don't know. Guys have asked me that for a really long time, and I never thought that would equate to anything. Having now tested these exhaust manifolds, I think that there might be. We've done 4-digit stuff with 2.5, so I don't know that there's any reason to go to 3-inch. And I mean, unless if you're building a pro mod motor or you're trying to do 1,500 horsepower or whatever. But if it's a street car, I would do the smaller stuff because you're not giving anything away and it probably packages better. The 6 liter will beat any 5.3. 5.3 is easy to get. Oh, Mike, absolute statements. I'd like to see an actual good comparison of weight difference with all accessories. I weighed my TPI versus the LQ4. I saw 45-pound difference actual. Was your TPI motor an aluminum-headed motor? Just rebuilt my 5.7 LS1. It runs great, but when it warms up, it has what sounds like lifter noise. It seems to be only when it's warm, which is the opposite of normal bad lifters do, right? I don't know. I don't know if the lifter tick is only... I don't know if guys are hearing... Like, if they're only hearing when it's cold, I wonder if they're hearing piston slap. What's the best shelf cam for an L92 as a stock converter, everyday vehicle that will tow occasionally? There's no best shelf cam. So if you want to run something with a stock converter, an L92 gives you a little bit more flexibility because it's bigger. So it will tame cams down. The cam that I would recommend is my low buck truck camshaft for that. That's what I would put in it because I would want to have the thing be drivable. There probably are other cams that you would work with a stock converter. The Truck Norris cam, Chupacabra probably would work for a factory, a stock converter. But nothing very big is going to work great with a stock converter. It's going to have to be something like that. What are your thoughts on an MSD 6014 ignition box and a carburetor? We've run those a lot on LS motors. Richard, everyone, would you recommend? Oh, I thought you said everyone would recommend, but there's a comma there. Would you recommend upgrading lifters for a budget LQ4 fresh 450 flywheel horsepower? Just order your low buck truck cam and springs. We sell them, and we'll be happy to sell you some. But quite honestly, like the L33 that I have that has now 650 or 700 pulls on it, and all of the whatever miles it had from the wrecking yard, those are the original lifters, and so they work good. But the thing is, you don't know that they all will do this. What mine did. Stock converter will probably bog down a cammed engine. My wife said, "You look cool today with a hoodie." Give a shout out. Ivory's in the house. Ivory, that's the Ivory Coast. That's soap. There wasn't there an Ivory soap? It's an automatic daily driver. LQ4. I got it bored some flat tops. That's about it. Still at the machine shop getting finished. I just want to see what's a good choppy cam for it. I would those cams I just mentioned would be my go-to cam for a daily driver. With the LQ4 and the low buck truck camshaft that we ran and the Trailblazer SS, it made 452 horsepower or 457 foot-pounds. Makes 10 or 15 more with the Truck Plus cam, but it loses power down low, so that you're going to get that trade-off. And I like this stuff. I like this stuff down low more than I like the stuff at the top of the rev range. My inspiration for the turbo position is like the Cosworth DFX, but in front. Okay. My 4.8 came with 799s. Thinking of 4.8 LS, what's a good build? There are lots of them. Just tell me how much power you want to make, and we'll tell you how to do it. I got endless 4.8 videos up on the channel. From stock all the way up to 1,200 horsepower with the turbo stuff. And a 4x4 setup is the most power split between diffs, meaning a factory diff on 1,000-pound setup only sees 500 each, not being very strenuous on the diffs. I don't know. I don't know how they split. Someone I know is selling a T6 hot side kit for an S13. I was planning on running a T4. Is there any downside to running a T4 with an adapter? LS2 with low buck truck cam and the turbo. What is a T6? The T6 hot side kit. So they have a turbo section, the hot side of the turbo section, but it's designed to mount a T6, and you want to know if you adapt it to a T4. I think it'll be fine. You might want to taper that a little bit, but I don't know how much overhang you're going to have with the T4 flange. You could always just cut that off and then weld on the T4. I don't know what size pipe that is, but I think it'll work fine. Was thinking if you get a banner for your wall, it should have your website on it. Yeah, it will. We're the Richard Holdner Performance.com will have a presence on the banner because they're one of the sponsors. Scrolling. Come on. Here we go. Got an opportunity to get an 84 Stingray Corvette in good condition, 80,000 miles on the dash. I'm thinking of swapping a 6-liter on Truck Norris cam and a 4L80 in it. Do you think I can leave the 5.7? The 6-liter is going to be way better than your Crossfire 350 that's in there. But how is the fitment for the trans in that Corvette? Michael, you can just boost it. I wish those thinner head gaskets were more common. I'd probably go 5 out of the deck on my Jeep inline 6 because most are 40 or 50 thousandths. Stock pistons on the 5.3, 20 head surface, 25. Should I rip it back down and increase the gasket thickness? I don't know what you're saying there. There's no way the piston's 20 out of the head. Like how far, where is the piston? How far down or up is the piston? Because if the piston's 10 up and you have a 27 gasket, that means you have 17 thousandths piston to head clearance. That's not going to work. Not LS related, but I like to see a big bang on a 351. Are there any bad LS motors to avoid in the junkyard when selecting a motor to swap into something? An LS4. But it has good parts on it. Like take the heads off of it, definitely. I want to build a 454 around 450 horsepower. Eventually want to put a 177. Can you still get those blowers? Do I need forged internals? You don't need forged internals. You should put ring gap in it. Seen videos on guys putting 177s on stock big blocks. Yeah, we did that and it works good. Richard, thanks for giving information. 800 horsepower asymmetric turbo. How would one size a snail for a 400 horsepower turbine and an 800 horsepower compressor? I honestly don't know that that's going to work. What I would do is you could take the GTX 3584 is already that. So what you could do is I would run a 6-liter. With a 6-liter, you'll get to 800 horsepower. And honestly, had we revved the 5.3 more, we could have got to 800 horsepower with the asymmetric turbo. Profile 4, you can adjust timing and it'll retard timing with boost, and you can set AFR targets. It also has open and closed loop. Tuning just isn't as in depth. As long as it will give me the air fuel that I want, then it would work fine. I don't know if that's a throttle body injection or if it's port injection. If it's throttle body injection, I'd be concerned with distribution. If it's port injection, I'd be a little happier. C4 Corvettes are perfect LS swap cars. I like those cars. Do clay the piston to valve clearance? I'm thinking of putting a 5.7 on my BMW. Yeah, you're also changing piston to valve by juggling the milling the head and milling the block and all that. So you need to look at that. But the quench thing is I think you're making it way too tight. Big cam with a stock converter would be a dog. Yeah, we went over that. Doing an engine swap on my single cab this May from a 4.8 to a 6.0. Would it be worth? Would be worth a swap? Yeah, you'll be much happier because like a 4.8 to a 6.0 is going to be like 70 or 80 foot-pounds. It's going to be a ton. Is it worth stroking a 5.3 and boost or just boosting a stock 6.0 money to power shooting for 800 wheel horsepower? You don't need to do a stroker. You just put boost on a 5.3. You could also do it on a 6.0, but 800 wheel horsepower is very easy with either one of those. On the 5.3 that we had, we just made 920, which would be 800 to the tire. It's just a low buck truck cam. The G42 turbo, it had all the stock stuff on it. It had springs on it. It had our injectors on it, and away you go. It's really easy. 243 heads, flat top pistons. Had my heads milled though. Yeah, the TFS head, which now I got to call Brian and get those TFS heads back. The trick flow heads we milled 30. LS1, 243 heads, GM hot cam, throttle body headers, and a 3200 stall. I'd like to do small boost application. Curious at what point I would run out of fuel pump, or am I already? Is that a stock fuel pump? I use a 706 stock dish. What do you guys recommend for 800 wheel horsepower, single turbo, iron, 346 LS6 intake, heads, BTR, turbo 4 cam? The thing that I would recommend is that you go to a different camshaft. And I love the guys at BTR, but that camshaft's way bigger than you need. Yeah, I would go down like 5 steps. I would put if you want a BTR cam, I'd put a Truck Norris in it. If you want one of my cams, we have a low buck truck camshaft, does very similar things. I would put a smaller camshaft in it because you'll be much happier on the street. Did you say that you had a big converter in this or something? Unless you have a big converter in it. 800 wheel horsepower is a G42 turbo for that, and it'll work good. BTR 400 plus nitrous cam was a dog down low. Yeah, that's a big cam. 4A, what does a torque converter do? Well, the easiest way to think about that is if you have right now, a stock one on a 4.8 or a 5.3 is like 1800 RPM. That means if you step on the gas, really kind of nothing happens until 1800 RPM. That's the starting point. But if, and whatever torque the motor's making at 1800 RPM, this is not totally accurate, but you need to think about it like this. So whatever power the motor has at 1800 RPM, that's what motivates the car. If you have a 3000 RPM stall converter, and now whatever power output the motor makes at 3000 RPM, now that's what motivates the car. So if you put a big cam in it that has less power down low and you put a stall converter in it, all of a sudden you're in the happy spot of the camshaft. It's an Elgin something, I think, for the L33 versus the LQ4. Good stuff. You can tune chop into an engine. Sorry to ask, what is my compression ratio? LQ4, 243 head, stock head gasket. Went onto the site to recommend too many variables on the LQ4, 9.9 with stock. I don't know, 10 and 10.6, let's say. Something like that. Thoughts on a twin turbo 46? What is your real question? You can run twin turbos on anything. I want to put it at my Cub Cadet. Okay, that's a really long motor. 6-liter LS with a turbo, wanting 1,000 horsepower. Should I go with a forged crank for longevity, or will the stock crank be reliable for weekend driving, pulls, and burnouts? Yes, you don't need a crank for that. Stock crank's fine. You need to go get a G42 turbo from my store, though. That would be good for that. And a low buck truck cam and injectors. Scrolling. Okay, what vehicles did the L33 come in from the factory? If you go to On All Cylinders, do a search for On All Cylinders L33, all of that information comes up. They list the years and everything. TPI discovered it had been swapped at some point of its life to a TBI motor, and we just installed the TPI intake and accessories onto it. Okay. Small cams are better for the street. Turbo the Crossfire. It's going to be hard getting fuel to that. All I know about stall converters, once I went with a 3200 stall on my then Cam Mopar 360, really woke it up. Ever test China headsets? Yeah, we just talked about that a little bit ago. Scrolling. That's right. Keep those Richards strolling. And I did all the actual parts that go into, including manifolds, wiring, ECU, because you're not going to use a TPI accessory on an LQ4. Will a turbo car lose power if I add a muffler? It depends on what muffler you add. Are you adding a super restrictive one? Otherwise, no. What's the best low-end LS intake with hood clearance? Probably the LS6. So if they don't mind make 177s anymore, what would be your recommendation for that blower? I don't know. I don't know what small blowers are even out there now for that. You might be able to find used ones, though. Does anybody think a 4L65 can handle 450 flywheel horsepower? Getting back into building my LS, sold my RCSB and bought a 2-wheel drive Tahoe. Plan to do a low buck truck cam, GT45, Trailblazer SS, Snake Eaters, E85. What's your recommendation on trans upgrades? I don't have recommendation on trans upgrades. I'm the wrong guy to ask that. I would pick a different turbo than that, though, if you haven't got it. Which factory cams fit in the cam bearing bores of an LM7? All of them. Also, what if I pick aftermarket cam? What features do I need to ask for to get a cam that can be installed properly, doing front cam sensor mod? All of the cams interchange. What you want to do is just get the right cam and trigger wheel for whatever you're doing, and then get a 3-bolt, because almost all of the factory, I mean, some of them are single bolt, but you're not going to put a single bolt cam in there. You're going to put a 3-bolt cam there, especially if it's an aftermarket one. Have you tested 3-bolt versus 4-bolt throttle bodies on Trailblazer SS intake manifold? No, I haven't done a stock 78 versus a 90 or 92. Are you going to get the head stud for the LS? What? I already have head studs in it. Thank you, Richard. You're the best. Thank you very much, Richard. So I got a 78 Malibu wagon. Awesome. Okay, I'm in. What engine do you think I should use? An Atlas, aluminum 5.3, an LQ4, small block Chevy, Holly high rim. All of those are good choices. There's no bad choice. You got to do the one that speaks to you. I think the Atlas is going to be the most problematic one, but it would be cool. A small block Chevy with a high rim, also cool. Any LS, also cool. So you got to get the one. Which one do you want to walk out and tell people about? LS3 heads versus LS7. What's the question there? There's really good ones of both of those, and not very many people are taking full advantage of what either ported versions of those heads have to offer. One of the guys using LS4. If you use that intake manifold, yeah, that's the worst one. Stock fuel pump on a previous question. I'm out of fuel pump already. Yeah, I would put a fuel pump in it, and go get one of our Hellcat Plus pumps. When you install a new cam, should the ECU have a baseline tune for the cam, or is it okay to start? No, it will start right up. Might not idle great, but the LS4 is a Fiero swap. Yeah. The BTR stage 4 was gifted. Okay, that free cams really are the best ones. I'm just saying it's way bigger than you need, and for a turbo combination, it's just not going to be very responsive. But it'll charge on the big end. All motor, 6-liter, big bangish. What's a realistic power number to look forward to heads, cam, and intake manifold on 6? I got endless 6-liter stuff. So there's no shortage of 6-liter information up there for lots of different heads and cams and intake manifolds. The most I've made with a 6-liter, and that was all in on stuff, was like 600. Does a truck Norris cam need a converter in a 4L80? The transmission doesn't have anything to do with that. The engine would have something to do with that. Max number of times you've used MLS head gaskets on the LS engine. I'm sure 15 on when we do head swaps, because we only run them for 6 runs and then we take them back off. See a lot of people running dual fuel pumps with turbo setups. Yeah, usually necessary for a turbo setup. Like one of the Hellcat 525 plus deals that we have, that's probably like a 700 horsepower at the wheel kind of setup, especially with the E85. So guys need 2 of those for if you're making real power. Norris NSR 5.3, nice. Those are good cams. On Turbo 400 is a stock converter. Okay, yeah, it would be. Just as long as people say stock, but there's a lot of different stock converters that they use. So something that's in the 2000 RPM range is fine. If it's more than that, it's also fine. Safe power and boost for an L. Man, why does it go down so far? Safe power and boost for an L92. Any build suggestions? Looking at turbo, a full weight truck in the future. An L92, we don't go over 1,000 horsepower on the aluminum LS3 base blocks. I don't know how long it will last like that if you did, but you're probably not looking to do that if you're, and you definitely need a ring gap and the other stuff. Richard, thanks for your help on the ZZP cam. Yep. I wish that somebody made which is why I had a custom one made. Someone made a dual pattern cam that's bigger than what they're showing there. MagnaFuel 750 works good. Yeah, you cannot have too much fuel pump unless your fuel pressure regulator won't bypass it. 706 heads with 202 valves imported better than 799s. Yes, we've had 706 heads that flow 300 CFM. So that's 50 more than a 790 than a stock 799 head. So it's very, very easy to make a 706 better than a 799, and a stock 706 head makes more power than a 799 on a 5.3 anyway. How much horsepower is the TBSS injectors for? I don't know. I don't know what size they are. You'd have to look and see. How much do you usually spend on wreck yard blocks? I don't buy blocks. We buy complete motors. It's been a while since I bought one, but anywhere from $200 or $300 to $500 or $600. What's the max horsepower to the wheels on a 6-liter with a G42? I don't know. I don't know what your drivetrain is or any of that, but I'm pretty confident it could do 1,000 at the tire. What's the best aftermarket head you'd recommend for a boosted 5.3 forged rods, flat top pistons, trying to be efficient and make all the power? Well, what power are you trying to make? Airflow research good, trick flow is good. Get something with a thick deck. My question was meant to be on the 4200 twin turbo was along the lines of, do you think a stock block would hold, and do you think it would be a worthwhile project? Well, I don't know what kind of power you're trying to make, Grease Spot. We've already run 42s with a turbo on them, and Calvin's run them a bunch. So you can make lots of power with those. There's a metal recycler a few miles from my house, and they have a huge dumpster full of core blocks I want to go through. Considering a rising boost curve, could a motor cam for bottom end work well at higher RPM? Also, you could put a short runner intake manifold on it and a rising boost curve, and it could still make power higher than the camshaft would suggest. But you're not going to cam something for 2,000 RPM. So when you cam something like even the low butt truck camshaft, which is it's a 212 cam, it still makes good power at 7,000 RPM. Shame on me, but I Googled cam bearings on an LS9 and an LM7, and they said that they were different. I don't know what's different about those. What would be the best LS to start with for 1,000 horsepower nitrous 8th mile grudge car? I don't know. I'd never. Well, we have tried to get 1,000 horsepower with nitrous at one time. We were doing it on a 5.3. If you were trying to make a lot of power on nitrous, the best way to do that is to make a lot of NA power and then add nitrous to that. So a bigger one. Would anyone know if budget Speedmaster heads are better than the 706 heads? I've not tried those. I just left your website. I don't see any headsets. We don't have headsets up there for sale yet. We're deciding whether or not we're going to offer those. And if we do, they will be ARPs. If Richard Holder ain't saying it ain't right, I don't know that we could go that far. What's the least flowing stock LS head and how much are they good for? It seems like they all flow great. They do. I think from a flow standpoint, a 706 or an 862 head has the least peak flow. But you can make 1,000 horsepower with them pretty easily with the turbo. .525 Hellcat pumps work great. Some guys run 3, 2 is pretty common. Remember to run 10 to 12 gauge wire because of the current draw. Yeah, don't run speaker wire to that. And yeah, guys package them in these tri-flow things. I have an 06 Silverado 6.0, currently has a Summit 8701 cam, 218, 227. What turbo do you think I should use? 7875 or GT45, looking for good low-end torque for towing. How much power do you want to make with the turbo? What block is better, LS1 or aluminum 5.3? Bore it out to 5.7 for boost. Well, what I would recommend is you get a 5.3 and you don't bore it out. Get an aluminum 5.3. It's much stronger than an LS1 block is, but don't bore it out. You don't need to bore it out. The boring out gives you nothing. Just add the turbo and make the power with the turbo. LS2 low butt truck cam, small turbo from your site. What size wastegates? Is the Hellcat pump on your site in line or in the tank? It's in the tank. And what kind of power are you wanting to make? If you're running the GTX 3584, that will work good. We are testing. We have wastegates now. And so I want to test them and make sure that they're going to work right. But we have 50s and 60s, I think. And anyone know about ACE's fuel senders? I don't. Why am I thinking I'm not going to get to all these questions? I'll love the Q&As. Have a 450 liter per hour Amazon regulator returned back through a 5/16. Regulates fuel, no issues at 58 PSI. Do I need a stall and a 4L80 with a truck Norris cam? What engine is it? The 4L80 doesn't matter. Good wiring is definitely a good idea. Calvin has a twin turbo 4200. Will his EZP stage 2 cam hurt my low end? Compared to what? Compared to stock, yes, it will. Is the restriction needed to help build pressure, or is this legitimately limiting fuel flow? I just want a 3. What restriction are you talking about? Richard, if you had to run a junkyard engine, I do all the time. At a minimum, what would you change or upgrade for endurance or extended runtime? We run them on the dyno to see if they work. We also usually do a compression test, sometimes a leak down test. Maybe I would change the oil pump. And then I always look at the rocker cups and the push rods. Look at that stuff. Smaller air spools faster. Yeah, that can help a little bit. Bring the Buick back. It will spool faster than an 88 millimeter, but still make 1,000 horsepower. An 88 is huge for 1,000 horsepower. You don't need a turbo like that at all. Our G42 would be way better than that. For the Silverado, looking for 550 to 600 at the tire. I would go with the small turbo that we have on the site. The GTX 3584 is perfect for that. Why not cam a motor with a centrifugal for 2,000 RPM? I don't cam a motor. What kind of cam do you think you're going to put in a motor that's going to want to make peak power at 2,000 RPM? It's just not going to happen. I plan on getting a low buck truck cam if I end up pulling the motor. I'll buy the BTR turbo cam if you want to swap it out. What are some recommendations for 6-liter E85 1,000-pound injectors? What is it you want to know? What are you asking for recommendations? Cams or turbos or what? Are you done tinkering with the 8.1? No, we're going to do some more stuff. I got a 355 Vortec motor. How can I apply TPI on it? Somebody, I think Skog and Dickey makes a TPI lower manifold with the Vortec bolt pattern. Otherwise, you can re-drill the manifold or the heads to bolt that on. Would I be better to run a ZZP versus cam, which is a 206? Dennis, you got to tell me what you're trying to do. I don't know how much power you're trying to make. I don't know what size turbo you have. I don't know any of that. And what I think, honestly, is you're worried way too much about this cam situation. With everything you have on your site, can I make 500 to 600 to the wheels? And if so, I have an L83. An L83 5.3 is a Gen 5 motor, and we don't have stuff for that. I mean, we have a turbo, but we don't have cams. We can sell you BTR cams because we're a BTR dealer, but that's a direct injected motor. What you're going to have to worry about is getting fuel to that. So you have to buy very expensive injectors because you're going to have to buy LT4 injectors for that. You have to get a camshaft that has a bigger lobe on it so that you have more pump. So you have to buy LT4 injectors and an LT4 pump, and then a cam that has a lobe to feed that DI motor. That's a different motor. What injectors do you recommend for a 6-liter E85 1,000 horsepower? I don't think 1,000s are going to do that. They might, but I think you're going to have to go with something bigger than that, 1,500s or something. Have you tested the Summit manifolds? I have not. LS2 low bit truck cam, GTX 35. Want to make 550 to 600 wheel. What size wastegate? 1 or 2. You should be able to get away with 160 would be fine. What does AR mean in relation to the turbo? Jarrett, the best way to describe that is for you to go on and do a search for that, and they will show you a diagram of what the AR is measuring. TPI stuff is very particular about accessory brackets. What was the difference in torque you tested with your low buck truck cam versus a torque cam stage 3? I don't know what a torque cam stage 3 is. Can I keep the TBI on my 97 S10 if I decide to go with the turbo? I don't know what the fuel flow is going to be on your TBI setup. I don't think it flows enough fuel for a turbo. You're going to have to augment that somehow and get additional fuel flow. I also don't know what the airflow is of the TBI setup. Do you plan on posting horsepower recipes that can be cheesed using your products? Yes, but I have really all of that is up on the channel already. Do you have a preferred oil? I don't. The oil that I put in the wrecking yard motors is whatever's on sale at the local Autoport store. We got 1 more minute, and I never did a poll. Make sure everybody go check out the site. Make sure everybody go check out the video they posted, the 5.3 versus 6 liter. That's just good stuff. The BTR torque cam you tested versus your low buck truck cam. I never compared both of those. Not on the same motor. It was a truck Norris cam. What cam from BTR would you use for an L83? Probably a truck Norris. What is your go-to brand of torque converter? I don't really have one. I haven't dealt with a torque converter company, but there are guys here that have. What's the best range to run an engine in its power band, near the horsepower torque intersection or above? For what? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get fuel mileage, cruise? Are you trying to accelerate the best through the RPM range? What are you trying to do? Thanks for all the sick stuff. Happy to help. If you have a double overhead cam, you use 3/4 race cams. Does that mean it's 1.5? It is. It's a multiplier, right? Did you ever get a hold of First TPI? I have not. Thomas, the maximum acceleration comes from the greatest average horsepower. So usually that's running the motor in gear from somewhere below the horsepower peak to the horsepower peak and then past the horsepower peak, so that when you shift, it drops back down. You want to have the average, the best average top part of that curve. What's max power on a factory 24-pound injector? Just multiply it by 16. Just multiply that number by 16 or the 56 number by 16. That will tell you how much power they can make. They can actually make a little bit more than that because the brake specific is not 0.5, but I didn't want to go into that. The easy thing to give you an idea is multiply that number by 16. And that tells you. Do you need to change the camshaft on a DOD Elite on a 2009? The lobes are different on that camshaft. The DOD lobes are different than the non-DOD lobes. Yeah, Dan always brings the 5 out of 3. And on that note, it is time to go. So I will see you guys all tomorrow.